And I have zoomed in on some sweet gum leaves. I started a series on the sweet gum a few weeks ago at the Culberson Woods State Nature Preserve in Clinton County, Ohio, with the leaves from a broken tree. I didn't have any good fruits or bark to look at the time, but I do now. So here's our star-shaped leaves. And I'm going to start looking at the bark of sweet gum. We got one right here. It doesn't really distinguish itself from the other trees too easily. We do have a sweet gum here, 4 inches in diameter, with some cracks in the bark. Almost looks like it could be a dogwood tree. And the same size tree behind it is a red maple. I'm going to walk around here. There's quite a few of them in this grove. This is a fairly young forest here. I'm guessing maybe 40 to 50 years old at the most. But there's a lot of sweet gum coming back in to what probably used to be farmland here. And a lot of pin oak and a lot of red maple. So let's do a comparison. Here's a pin oak. And at this age, the bark is just starting to get some signs of furrowing, but it really isn't furrowed. We got a musclewood tree growing in this swamp forest. And here's the sweet gum. It's starting to get some small furrows. The cracks, or the furrows, are maybe a ½ inch apart. And they don't really get that deep, and they don't really go that far before they start converging with other furrows. So it's more platy than furrow, but this is a 1-foot diameter sweet gum tree. And when these sweet gum trees grow in a forest with other trees, they tend to grow very straight, and the crown is very, very narrow at the top. They do not spread out their branches laterally in this situation. They will if you grow them in your yard, but in the woods here, they grow extremely narrow, very narrow growth. Again, that bark, if I'm walking through these woods, that bark doesn't jump out and say, I'm a sweet gum. They could easily be confused with a red maple, but it is a sweet gum. Just for comparison, we do have a red maple the same size growing right here. And its bark at this particular age is much lighter and not as cracked or as furrowed, but it does have similar furrows where they do exist. On this side of the tree especially, it does have some cracks and furrows. So sometimes not being able to tell the tree apart leads to other ways of identifying them. So this channel is about bark, is using the bark as a primary method of identification, but in this case they just don't jump out and say, I'm a sweet gum. But as you're walking through the woods, you find these fruits. And there's no other tree that has a fruit looks like this. It almost looks like a ball of spikes or nails. They're about the size of a quarter. I didn't have a quarter with me today, so I got a nickel in there and a dime for scale. And they cover the ground year-round, basically. These things do not decay quickly. And if you're walking along and you start seeing sweet gum fruits on the ground, they don't look like acorns, they don't look like hickory nuts, they don't look like maple tree helicopters or ash tree helicopters. They don't look like anything else you're going to find in the area covered by this channel. So that's how I knew I was in a sweet gum grove. Not by the bark, not really by the leaves, because most of the leaves are out of sight, but by the fruits. So that's one thing. You start seeing these fruits in the woods, you're in a sweet gum grove. And that's the primary method of identifying the tree. I'm looking around for the tree, finding the fruits, and it takes me a few minutes to figure out which tree it is. I got to find some leaves. And without the leaves, it would be a tough identification.